Hello, everyone. Welcome to my mini lecture series in sociology. In 1913, automaker Henry Ford figured out a way to mass produce automobiles on a moving assembly line. Ford's goal was to make cars that could be affordable for middle class Americans. Up until that time, most cars were built by skilled craftsmen, and only wealthy people could afford one. With the conveyor belt system, Ford reduced the amount of time needed to produce a single car from 12 and a half hours to approximately 90 minutes. While he became very successful at standardizing the technology to meet the rising demand for automobiles, he did have a problem with the labor force, in particular alienation, and that's what I want to talk a little bit about. While the term alienation has various meanings, sociologists draw typically upon the work of Karl Marx and refer to alienation as separation of human beings from each other, from themselves, and from the products that they create. In regard to separation from each other, people had little chance for meaningful interactions while they stood in one spot waiting to perform a specialized task on an assembly line. In terms of separation from themselves, they became disconnected from their creative potential because the task only required a fraction of their talents. As far as separation from the product, they had no control over what they produced, in part because machines determined the nature and the pace of the production, not the workers. Perhaps most importantly, the workers did not own what they produced and profited very little from their labor. The monotonous life in the factory created a high turnover rate. Historian Stephen Meyer, who has written about the history of the Ford Motor Company, estimated that Ford had a workforce of about 1,300 employees at the Highland plant in Michigan, but people would work a few days, weeks, or months and then stop showing up. In 1913, Ford hired 52,000 extra workers to sustain production. Stephen Meyer estimated it took $35 to break in each new Ford employee, meaning that Ford, within a single year, lost $1,820,000 because of a turnover rate of about 400%. To cope with this labor crisis, Ford made a bold move. On January 5, 1914, he announced the $5 workday. This nearly doubled the wages of assembly line workers at that time, who earned just $2.40 a day. $5 a day at that time amounts to about $130 today. Ford added other changes as well. He shortened the work week from 6 to 5 days and reduced the work day from 9 to 8 hours. The turnover rate dropped tremendously, which enabled Ford to supply enough automobiles to meet their increasing demand, and he eventually dropped the price of a Model T from about $800 to $350. It is interesting to note that the $5 workday came with strings attached. The base wage remained around $2.40, but the employees only qualified for the additional $2.60 if they met certain conditions enforced by a newly created sociological department within the company. Now, I don't think there were really sociologists working there, but that's what they called the department. Officials from this department have visited the homes of employees, sometimes unannounced, to ensure they operated no outside businesses or that they refrained from taking in boarders, avoided excessive smoking or drinking, contributed regularly to a savings account, and much more. Ford wanted to ensure that family life did not interfere with work. He was especially concerned about the composition of his workforce, which consisted of many sons of immigrants from Poland, Russia, Romania, Italy, and Hungary. He wanted to instill worker discipline and control over immigrants who came from countries less familiar with industrialized society. Of course, the employees considered the actions of the sociological department to be an invasion of privacy, and a few years later, Ford abandoned the project. While Ford's changes seemed insane to many business people at the time, his profits increased dramatically. He became one of the world's first billionaires because he found a way to standardize technology and attempted to standardize the very people that were working for him. Historians and sociologists debate whether his changes reduced worker alienation. The increased wages and reduced workload had no effect on the actual work performed, they still did the same repetitive, monotonous tasks, meaning the workers remained separated from each other and from themselves. However, it is possible they felt more connected to the product since the increased wages and lower car prices enabled them to purchase cars they once could not afford. However, the original intent of the $5 workday was simply to pay people enough money to come to work each day and withstand the unpleasant conditions. Do you think worker alienation remains a problem today? I ask that question because the workforce has changed dramatically since the industrial age of Henry Ford. According to the United States Bureau of Labor Statistics, at that time, in 1910, nearly 1 out of 3 workers had manufacturing jobs. The latest available data from 2018 indicate that less than 8% of the labor force works in manufacturing. The vast majority of workers today, 78.2%, have service-oriented jobs, for example, in retail, state and local government, health services, and so on. To what extent do they experience alienation? On a broader note, many people today are concerned about another type of alienation that Karl Marx did not directly address, known as social alienation. This type of alienation occurs when people experience tense or deficient relationships with others because they do not fit well in society. For example, some jobs today, restaurant businesses, nail and beauty salons, dentistry, pose a threat to society because of concerns about the coronavirus. From the order point of view, work provides a sense of meaning to life. It constitutes a contribution to other people. It connects them with the goods and services they need. But what happens to workers when society changes in a way that denies them opportunities to use their work to connect with others? Of course, many people derive meaning from work, but the circumstances in society play a huge role in defining what type of work is meaningful.